Good morning, everyone. So we will continue after this fantastic presentation with this session, carrying on multidisciplinarity and collaboration in science. My name is Electra Gizeli. I'm an IMBB Deputy Director, a professor at Applied Biology and Biotechnology, and we're based in Crete in Greece. So I will moderate this session, and we're having 4 panelists who are going to present their pitchings. We're having Hana Svozilova from CEITEC, a PhD student, Jan Steyaert from VIB, Scientific Director, Tanja Florin from MDC, Science Manager, and Reik, Scientific Director of Altos Labs. And I would like to ask Hana to start with her pitching. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Hana, as was already said. I'm a PhD student, and now I would like to present my point of view, the experience of doing research in more disciplines. And let's start. So, firstly, a brief introduction of what I do. So basically, I'm getting materials from other research institutes, either it's university or industry. And I also get patient cells from hospital, and I'm trying to put it all together and create a model, a 3D in vitro model of leukemia. Now, I'm very lucky to be a part of CEITEC consortium because it also involves both technical university and also Maastricht University, which has life sciences fields. And because of that, we also have something which is called Bridge Fund. It's a fund intended for PhD students, so it's supporting early career researchers already from the start of their research, and they get to write grant proposals. It's for PhD students who are doing science both in life sciences and material sciences. And when you combine it together into a nice project, you might get lucky and get some scholarship and also some funding for your research. That is really cool because we get to do some basic grant proposals already when we are young. And also we get some consultation from the interdisciplinary committee, because when we are doing multidisciplinary science, it's not only about one consultant, but about consultants from various research fields. What we also have is PhD retreats, which are done by PhD students for PhD students. And those are events that combine lectures from various fields. So we get to find the scope of other groups also as well, and we can find some points of collaboration. And what we also have is informal meetings called CEITEC Tea Times, which I also help to organize. And those are the meetings where we just meet for a cup of tea or coffee, and we discuss random stuff. Either it's some topic, specialized one, like speed networking, or it's elevator pitches, or it can be just that we meet and exchange our muffins and stuff we baked at home and so on. So it's a nice, friendly occasion to meet people from different labs and then make friends, and then it's easier to collaborate with someone who you already know. But certainly there are some points that we can improve, and also there are some things that I've encountered during my journey, and I wish I could have done them differently. So when I was talking about the network of the collaborators in the beginning, already in the first month of my PhD studies, I've encountered some disagreements because there were some expectations there that weren't met, such as we thought that we were getting results quite faster, and how come that the research that you are doing lasts so long, or you need so many materials, and I was kind of confused that I thought I could have more materials or more patient cells. So I know right now that it is really good to really set your expectations and also the limitations that you can expect during your research, because otherwise people might get quite confused during your research. Also, it got stuck. It's here now. So another thing, as I was mentioning, the multidisciplinary conferences, it's really cool, but sometimes it lacks some simplicity, because then you have, for example, plant scientists presenting their research, and then you have people from various other fields listening to the topic, and sometimes people are kind of counting with the fact that something is simple and I don't need to explain it. But in the end, it's not so simple. People get lost, and then they start to be confused, start to think about having lunch, start to take out their laptops and work on laptops. And this happens not only in multidisciplinary science, but it also happens everywhere else. But in multidisciplinary science, it's really quite crucial to explain even the stuff that you think that everybody knows. So what I would suggest, that we are all scientists, we are probably clever, but we are really highly specialized, so we don't really see into other fields, and it's really good to simplify the topic. Also about CEITEC tea time, and I'm shooting into my own leg right now, but I know that it's cool, but we don't get to meet all of the people. And the people that are still lacking are the introverts that do not come for CEITEC tea times because they are afraid of people, and also people who are really hardworking and they are working 24/7 in the lab, and they just don't find time for just having a cup of tea or coffee, and so on. And those are often the ones hiding the biggest treasures, because they are really devoting a lot of time to their research. So what I would think would be really nice is to organize some skills webs where we would really show what we can offer to the others. And it would be really nice if all scientists, not even PhD students, would be motivated to attend, so it would be somehow rewarded, so that even the introverts and the hardworking people get to come to these events and present what they can offer. So to conclude, what I would like to keep, what I would like to trash and plant, is that I would really like to keep motivating young scientists through the multidisciplinary course that we have, like Bridge Fund. Multidisciplinary meetings are really cool, but still with the add-on that we should really trash that everybody knows something and I don't need to explain it. Yeah, probably we really need to explain everything, and I think that simplification never hurt anyone. And that applies even to explaining expectations, because sometimes you kind of think that the other side expects something and you don't need to explain it. Yes, explain it, it's better to set it clear. What I would like to plant, and personally I don't have precise solution on how to do it, is to motivate scientists to attend soft skills and science communication courses, and not only in their early career, but throughout the whole career, to educate themselves all the time, because I think it is good not to fall out of the education, and also to organize some skills webs. Both of these things, both of these points, I would kind of like them to be rewarded somehow, so that people can find time for attending them, because right now I think it's not pretty well evaluated, and lots of researchers just put it as a priority number 70 because they have lots of other more important work. So that's it from me, and my colleagues will probably follow with other topics. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Jan. I built my scientific career, I think, on collaborations with top labs worldwide, but also with industry, and I just want to reflect on the problems I encountered over the years with these things. So, bottlenecks to academic collaboration and open innovation. Is this working? I like this, to open this pitch. I mean, everyone knows this small device to sequence DNA, and this is really an example of collaboration. I mean, there is, at the heart of the system, there is biology. There is a transporter that was developed in our lab, but without the microelectronics and the software and the tools to translate current into sequence, this would have no means. So this is clearly what a multidisciplinarity can bring to empower science and innovation. However, there are quite some issues, and I think we have to work along 4 lines to empower collaborations. I will talk about the administrative burden. We have to think about the reward models. We have to think about the granting models, and we have to build a culture of trust. What do I mean with this? Let's start with the culture of trust. How many times did you struggle with MDAs, CDAs, all the kind of shit you have to fill before you can even talk to collaborators? I mean, we have to find solutions for this. I'm not really sure whether this is the final solution, but it's at least something to think of for a number of the things we are doing. Let's talk rather than to fill papers. Administrative burden. How many times did you reformat your CV? How many times did you fill all these ethics documents? How many times did people ask you about the DMPs, GDPRs? I mean, it's getting worse and worse and worse. So there are some very nice tools available. Let's use them. I mean, there is the ORCID. Make that into a flexible CV that can be used by anyone who needs your CV. Why not build, oh, there is a part missing, but I would also like to develop a similar thing like ORCID that handles with all the stuff relating to DPMs, ethical things, so that again, you get one single figure, a number, you're accredited for all these things, you fill it in on your application, done. New reward models. I mean, this is the result of a collaborative work. Can you imagine being one of the people of the genomic investigators or of the Scourge consortium? I mean, we have to rethink, I think, rewarding people who do the effort to go into these collaborative efforts. I mean, this is not the way to reward people who are involved in these studies. And the same, of course, accounts for rewarding, translating your science into technology. I mean, we were lucky that one of our spin-offs really made it, and it was sold for 4 billion euros. And many people ask me, oh, you're a lucky guy, you don't have to write grants anymore. Forget it. I mean, we have to rethink the way founding labs, but maybe also the taxpayer, are rewarded for successful spin-off. And I want to end with the new granting models. It was already mentioned yesterday, but the runaway of an ERC project, for example, is, if you include writing it, about 7 years. So how can you decide on day 1 who's your collaborator in year 4? I mean, it's just impossible. So we need ways to foresee some cash, some money to collaborate in a flexible way during the runaway of these projects. So in conclusion, I think it's mainly about policy, and we have to work on our policies. I mean, that's the key to better collaboration within Europe, but also worldwide. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Hello and good morning, everyone. I'm Tanja, and I'm here to share my experiences as a science manager at the MDC in Berlin. And I would like to contribute some perspectives from the viewpoint of a science manager on collaboration, multidisciplinarity. So I will give you some insights and some lessons learned that lessons that I took from working for 4 years now at the MDC in this role. And of course, I'm not going to give you a comprehensive overview of all the collaborative initiatives that the MDC is doing, but just my personal point of two particular initiatives or entities that I coordinate. So I think one important part to mention here is that the MDC is part of a larger research association, the Helmholtz Association, which also enables a lot of collaborative efforts between different disciplines. And as part of as a Helmholtz Center, the MDC has a research program that it is funded for. And the current program is called Systems Medicine and Cardiovascular Disease. So as you can see, we are trying to basically tackle biomedical problems more in a systemic approach, really seeing the entire organism. And for that, we need our researchers to not only focus on their disciplines, such as, for example, in the cardiovascular system, but also really focus on how do these different systems, for example, the immune system, the cardiovascular system, how do they interact, how do they crosstalk, and so on. So as one pillar of this research program, we have the topic Integrative Biomedicine, which I coordinate. That's a group of 35 research groups. And among them are basic researchers, translational researchers, and also clinician scientists. So here, of course, we want to foster the collaboration between the different disciplines. And how do we do that? As Hana nicely pointed out, communication is key. So we have seminars where talks are given on a conceptual level, and these talks are given by PIs together with early career researchers, because I think we can all agree that the early career researchers are really the essence also in driving collaborative efforts. So they're always included in our initiatives. What I learned in this effort is that what doesn't work is the focus on structural framework, because how do we get motivated? We're intrinsically motivated by the scientific question and not by a certain framework that we first develop and a certain funding mechanism. So for us, always in our meetings, the science comes first, and then based on the question, we try to figure out, okay, how to structure something around that. And of course, just repeating everyone, the administrative burden needs to be lowered, and also the visibility of these collaborative efforts has to be increased. And then as part of this program, Systems Medicine and Cardiovascular Disease, the MDC also teamed up with two institutions in Berlin, the Charité University Medicine and the Berlin Institute of Health, to tackle the problems of vascular diseases. And as you can imagine, especially, for example, from a clinician perspective, if you work at the Charité or if you're a patient with a vascular problem doesn't show up in the vascular clinic because that one doesn't exist. So you will show up, for example, if you have kidney problems, you show up in the nephrology or in the cardiology or pulmonology. So there you already need to have some interdisciplinarity among the clinicians. They need to understand each other. But in order to not treat the symptoms, but the actual disease, the underlying cause, we also need to understand the mechanism. So work together with the basic researchers, again, from different disciplines. So we have epidemiologists, we have microbiome researchers and vascular researchers. And the interesting part about the Berlin Center for Translational Vascular Biomedicine is that it was funded by these three institutions, but it is a completely community-focused initiative. So even our research goals were set up in a bottom-up approach at the kickoff meeting. So the researchers themselves decided what is needed, what is feasible in Berlin, what can we do with the current infrastructure, and where do we want to go in the next 5 years. And then we also had a collaborative project call where one thing that had to happen was you needed to collaborate with a person from a different discipline in order to answer your question. Of course, regular networking events. And then what is also very important is to physically bundle research activities. So we have our core facility in one building on campus. What doesn't work is that what I experienced, that basically the funding mechanisms, regulations, requirements need to be clear and not necessarily changing over the funding period, because that really puts a lot of burden on this entire system. And one further point is that the reporting often takes up a lot of time, and it's often not being used in an efficient way, because what do we do with all these written reports afterwards? So instead, this brings me to my last point, is basically how to make these different initiatives that are funded for a certain number of years more sustainable. Is a report really the thing that we want to take from it, or should we not try more of a community approach, an interactive approach, maybe a retreat, where we really discuss the members and the funding bodies of how to really make this sustainable, how to take the gained knowledge and technologies, and of course also the community that we created within the last years to a next step. Yes, and with that, I would like to thank you and hand over to the next panelist.
Hey, happy birthday, EU Live. And well done to all of you guys in the audience who made this happen. And thank you, Marta and Monica and everyone else for having me here today with you. So just as a brief introduction, my name is Reik. I'm an epigeneticist. I've been in the UK for a long time. I've been at the VIB-VUB Institute for a long time. VIB-VUB is part of EU Life, and was very moving actually to hear Marta mention Michael Wakelam yesterday, who many of you know and has been leading VIB-VUB for a long time in EU Life. Now, I was, what's the expression? I was unexpectedly spirited away from VIB-VUB last year. I don't know what the right expression is, but I came up with that sort of unexpectedly spirited away to help create a new research organization in the world, which is called Altos Labs. And we, at this point, have 3 institutes worldwide. We have one in San Diego, we have one in San Francisco, and we have one in Cambridge in the UK. And this is our institute in Cambridge, a new place in Cambridge. Started about a year ago. We are in a beautiful building, I mean, not externally, but internally, beautiful building architecturally, so, you know, come and visit us. The happy people there, the happy people in lab coats doing happy experiments, and hopefully happy people getting happy results. This is what we all, we're all there for and hope for. So please come and visit us as well. And I'm just using, so we're sort of, you could say we're a toddler in the way of walking into the future of building the research center of the future. So we're sort of staggering as a toddler does, 1-year-old into the future. So we need a lot of help, and I hope you guys can help us as well, and that we, with our experiences, can help you to build your dream research centers of the future as well. So in thinking, in thinking about what works in science, then in setting up Altos, we thought about how is science done in academia and how is science done in industry. So that's probably covers sort of 80% of how science is done in the world. There are other ways of doing science, government organizations, things like that, but the main sort of bulk of science probably done in academic institutions and in industry. And then within that, the things that, when we look at it, the things that we really like and then the things that we probably would like to kind of, leave behind. So the things that we would like to leave behind are on the right. They're in black and white. Don't look at them. Just look at the ones that we would like to keep, which are in color on the left. And just to take you briefly through some of those things, and it will, in the following 2 slides, reinforce those kind of points, because I think that's how we want to move into the future. So in terms of what's sort of best in industry, you might say, there's mission-driven research, so big problems, long-term problems, where industry can put a lot of effort and momentum behind it, really important. The success is measured by genuinely useful outputs. Now that's a big thing to be saying and to be defined, and what that actually means. I think probably development of medicines is a clear output that we can measure like that. Then it's also incredibly collaborative and very nimble in moving resources around to, chase the big problems, I think. Now in academia, we all, treasure the creative space that we have, the breadth of the knowledge, the multidisciplinarity, which is part of this kind of session, also the long-term view, long-term problems that we need to address, and our autonomy and freedom. Academic freedom is something that we really, really cherish and treasure a lot. So how can we combine these things into a vision of the research center of the future in some ways? So what we need, sorry, I didn't realize these are animations, apologies. So what we need, and I'm not going to look very much at the barriers. Again, these are things we would like to leave behind if we can. But what are the things that we would like to move towards? To a collaborative workspace in terms of architecture, and open spaces that includes everyone, not only scientists, but admin, operations, everyone in the same space. Incredibly important, I think. We call it hyper-collaboration. This is to empower scientists to collaborate freely on big problems, or problems that they identify, without even having to ask the PIs for permission to collaborate with others. This is our sort of mantra, and people have beginning to take it on and get really excited about it. Mission-driven research, this means the focus on big problems, big missions, again, collaborative work to tackle longer-term big problems. And then, of course, that needs funding, which understands the long-term vision, the collaborative spirit, the reward structures for individual scientists that participate and buy into that kind of vision. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of, this is what our sort of view of the research center. So this has 8 arrows, Marta. There are your 8 arrows there, pointing into the future. And I'm not going to go through these things. I highlighted a number of things, but maybe just to highlight in red a couple of things that I feel particularly passionate about. So that's the collaborate across admin and ops so that we're all part of the same success. Incredibly important, I think. Break out of PI silos and collaborate within and across labs, and develop reward systems that allow and empower scientists to do that. Develop appropriate reward and career structures and funding models to fuel that type of science. And again, inclusive decision-making across science, admin, and ops, incredibly important as well. And so I'll just leave you with one single take-home message, which is this one, that the only way of evolving our research centers into the future is by changing our reward systems. for everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. So we went through the whole spectrum, heard how inspirational multidisciplinary work can be for students and scientists in general, suggestions on how to implement this. We also heard about some bottlenecks and problems and differences between academic and industrial environments. So I think many aspects have been covered, and there should be many questions and issues for discussion. Let me just ask one thing which I did not hear explicitly, and maybe I would like to bring to the discussion as well. I was thinking about global challenges, problems, health problems, environment, climate, biodiversity and loss. All these issues, do you think that the only way is a multidisciplinary approach? And how do you envision the incorporation of social sciences, humanities, historians, economists in this? Is this something that you have, something you can elaborate? Tell us a bit more.
Is this on? Okay. So from my point of view, I think the only way to address the broad problems, it is really interdisciplinary research. Also in terms of building trust in people, which involves a lot of social sciences, because lots of research which is done recently sometimes is like people tend to stop believing science sometimes. So it's really good also to work with the mind of people and realize how the message can be delivered so that people understand it, believe in it, and take the action together with the research teams. And yeah, there are lots of areas that really need the multidisciplinary approach also in terms of research projects.
Maybe I can make it. I think that was a really good point. Maybe I can also make an addition to that, which is that, we also focused on our disciplines, and even multidisciplinarity often means one discipline next to another. But I think there's also a big sort of space that people are thinking about being a generalist, not being a specialist. And so have generalists listening to all the stuff cutting across and then forming non-conformist opinions based on what they're listening to. I think that's another really important principle that we should be thinking about.
Thank you. So maybe we can now look to the audience and, okay, there are some hands. Thank you.
Hi, really nice presentations. Thank you very much. My question is for Wolf, because you've spent years in academia, but you're now in a private company. And the collaboration, it's also about the ecosystem. So my question is, what role can companies, and namely recently formed companies, have in changing and improving the way that we work collaboratively?
Sorry, I'm trying to... I didn't hear your question properly. Can you just...
So I'm curious to understand your vision on how can companies contribute to the ecosystem and to make it more collaborative, particularly a recently created company like the one that you are leading now.
Yeah. Good point. So I think this is the model that we're excited about. Altos is not the first company that's trying this out. The model of Bell Labs, you may remember, it's a very famous model where the transistor was developed, information theory was discovered. So that was it's a big example of how a corporate big company environment can foster basic science and all the transitions across to translation and product development. Now that needs a big vision, that obviously needs big investment. It needs a long-term vision. It also needs a vision that's not just there to make money. You know, it has to be an enlightened vision and long-term vision, but I think there is a lot of potential for this, I think. There are a lot of very wealthy investors and benefactors in the world that could help us to contribute to that kind of vision.
I think we should talk in another way to, as academics, we should talk to another way, in another way to industry. I mean, what I see most of the time is a company is interested in some of our science. What will they do? They will give us 200,000 euros, or they will give us a postdoc, and that's what they call a collaboration. And I think we shouldn't accept this longer. I mean, I think we should make clear that we really want to collaborate with them and co-develop things, and upfront make also clearer deals on if things go well, on revenues and all that. So we are not assertive enough as scientists, I think, whenever we talk to industry. And this has to do with the fact that all these universities look at, in collaborations with industry, again, in our current reward system as being very important, and they need these kind of deals as well. But if you look in many of these deals, these are bad deals, and I think industry is also realizing that they have to change these models of collaboration with academics, but we should be more assertive in this and really, just make our point and say we want to collaborate, but as partners and not just as a CRO.
Maybe I can follow up in this question and bring up the subject of trust, how trust is important to have among scientists and among researchers in academia and industry, and sharing. And do we really have common values related to this too? Isn't it important for everyone to understand the same thing, whether it's a scientist working in academia, industry, in Europe, Australia, or Africa? Do you have any views on this? If we can build trust, if there is enough trust, how much work we need to do, and how we can implement this in the future utopian research institute.
Yeah, I think, first of all, it is based on communication, right? Open communication, open science, and also starting that early on in the beginnings of the PhD career, for example, for the students. But also, I think, and going back to the collaborations with industry, I think it's also very important for early career scientists to understand how industry works, not necessarily only to see this as a potential career pathway in the future, but also especially to understand, okay, how is research being conducted in industry, and how can we then have better collaboration there? And I think if we understand the workings of these different institutions better, then we can also, this feeds into a trustful relationship. It's not only based on it, yeah.
Thank you. Do you have any questions there? Yes, Marta. Marta?
Thank you. Thank you so much to the whole panel. I have a more endogenous question. I really like the way, not surprisingly, I really like the way Jan finished his pitch, because he said something like, it's all about policies. And many times in EU Life, we discuss a lot that EU Life is for scientists and it's for developing sciences, but it's so difficult to engage scientists in what ULife does, and it's even difficult for us to explain to our community what it is about, which is something that we really want to trash and plant more in the future, how we engage the scientists. Because many times the devil is in the detail, right? One thing is policy, the other is bureaucracy, and everything is mixed in our heads. So I would say it's also about the narratives and how we portray this. So I really want to thank the panel for highlighting this. Also Wolf highlighting the need to engage everybody in the institute. And it's not about, which should be enough, about diversity. It's about everybody counts. So if you have further comments on this.
But we were discussing yesterday, and then there was a question, what do we have to do to increase collaboration? And the answer was, I mean, this has to come bottom up. There is not a single solution to create more collaborations. But there is one thing that we can indeed do, that's to change policies and to make the policies such that it's easier to collaborate. And then I think it will come bottom up. There is not a single solution. I mean, but these policies are terrible. We were talking about open science. I mean, it's a fantastic principle, but we all know that it gives us more burden than it gives us advantages at this moment. I mean, again, how many times a week do we have to fill documents and do things to prove that we are following the rules of open science? So they turn it around all the time. And again, it's policies imposed, I mean, with a nice ambition, but who's paying the price for this? We are paying the price.
Yeah, and maybe in addition, also the reward system, of course, as was brought up, needs to be appropriate. So, for example, if you're a researcher working in highly collaborative fields, you need a special set of skills, right? You need to be well organized, a good coordinator, and a terribly good communicator, and that, of course, all these organizational aspects and all this extra burden takes away from your pure scientific work, and therefore it should also be rewarded to have these special skills or to develop these special skills.
Thank you. I think there was a question over there. Okay. Okay. First, Monica. Yeah.
Just sorry, and picking on the last point, this issue of the reward system, I think it's something that is really, really important. And even, I mean, I was discussing yesterday also with Wolf about thinking about what sort of reward system, because you're talking about, giving freedom to postdocs to interact, etc. But then, of course, there are the group leaders and how you go about creating a synergy so that everyone feels that they are working towards the same thing, that it's good for everyone. And so again, and because the reward system in all of this is so important, can each one of you say like one thing in the reward system that you would change or that you would plant?
But there is a problem with the way we look at authors on papers. I mean, it's the first author and the last author, and that's it. I was, I think, on one Nature paper, number 7, ending from the end, but it was a crucial paper, and it brought me to 1 week in Stockholm, because it was a really crucial paper, but nobody recognizes this on that particular paper, because there were 27 authors and I was number 20. But the final author who got the Nobel Prize appreciated my collaboration, and he took me for 1 week to Stockholm. So, but it's reality. I mean, so the way we look at authorships on papers, and I gave another example just there on a Nature paper. You must be one of these people that are just named, even not by name, but by a consortium. I mean, so we have to rethink the way we award research.
It's a good question, Monica. I have many, but I mean, one thing to reflect also on is the declaration of research assessment that we are living with now for more than 10 years. It is a very good thing. It's a very good ambition, but has it actually worked? Is it actually working? I'm skeptical that it's actually working. So, I think that's one really important point. And, and we have to kind of break out of this evil triangle, sorry, this sounds horrible, of the collusion of, the publishers, the funders, the PIs, the referees. But, how do we break out of that? Because if we just, say we destroy it all, what's there? What reality do we want if we destroy it all? And I'm not answering your question, I'm sure.
Okay, I think there is a question over there. Sorry, it goes. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful discussion, and thank you for bringing forward many of the issues that we probably should verbalize more often. I was wondering, it seems what you're looking at as a future way ahead is, in a way, de-individualizing our profession and to emphasize more the shared value. Almost maybe even referees could become jobs, or and decreasing the emphasis on the individual success and more about the shared goal and mission. So if that's the goal of science, which I guess it is because we're all codependent, would Altos Labs be able to somehow foster change in academia, and how could that be funded? Could the European Commission become enticed to make those changes, and where would, the role of companies versus academia, how do you see that going ahead?
Shall I try and answer that first and then pass to my colleagues? It's a really good question, and I mean, so we're trying this big experiment, right? It's a big experiment. It's a scary thing and an exciting thing, but it's not, as I said, there was Bell Labs before, so they're kind of these types of models. So Altos is not totally unique, but hopefully, we really hope that through this kind of discussion that we have here, we can learn from you guys, and hopefully, there's some things that we talked about today that can help you guys. And then if we can excite the funders, benefactors, industry to invest into that type of model of science, I think it would be amazing and wonderful. And
yeah, maybe I can add that in order to change this reward system, of course, you cannot do it in one institution, and that's where groups like EU Life, right, are essential, because as we discussed also yesterday, science is a highly mobile field, so people move on a lot to different institutions within their career. So if one institution uses this de-individualized system, which is not being appreciated by a different institution, so people basically, lose points in their career. And so therefore, it is really important to have a joint focus on that if we want to push this forward.
And I would maybe like to add to Monica's question. So on Friday I was at a conference, and there was one idea that maybe teaching should be rewarded. And there was a big discussion about that, and quite interesting, because a lot of people said that there is a lot of time we devote to teaching, but it's not rewarded anyhow. But then again, there was some good point that if you make it rewarded, then sometimes people will teach just because they want to make check in their projects and they just don't want or need to teach, they just do it for the reward. So there was like lots of opinions about that and a really interesting discussion about teaching involved in the rewarding system.
Okay, thank you. There were some more hands. Yes, the lady. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so this is a really, really important discussion. I think for all of us leading institutes, it's really something we think about a lot. And one maybe inherent issue with also EU Life Institutes is that, you know, we heard about this sort of like 9-year model from EMBL. So we in some ways see that as an essential pillar of our innovation landscape at these independent research institutes to turn talent around. But that actually traps us even more in this traditional reward system, because we have to make sure that after the 9 years or whatever that time span is, that people are competitive on the job market to have sustainable careers. So I wonder, maybe from this panel, where you see sort of maybe that first step that we also as institutional leaders could take to try to address that, because, you know, the turnover is an essential pillar of the innovation in our landscape, and yet we're probably the most dependent on that current assessment landscape, just because we also have to make sure our junior groups succeed.
But I think the key is not to change the reward system, but to refine the reward system. I mean, currently there is what, the age index, there is, we try to reduce this to 1 or 2 parameters, and that doesn't fit all of us, that just fits, yes, the top PIs. We should refine it and introduce more things that people can be rewarded for, that are also visual. I mean, not all our scientists want to reach that age index of 60 either, or 100 either. I mean, so there is different ambitions, but we tend to reward on 2 or 3 parameters, and that's why ORCID, for example, could be a perfect way if we would all accept this, for example, as a CV and build this in really something flexible where more awarding parameters could be included, and where people could in a standardized way, but at least look at more rewards. That could be a way. So don't throw away what we have, but let's try to refine it.
Okay, we have lots of questions. There are 2 hands over there.
Thanks so much. Just building on the point and just bringing in some of the conversations yesterday, we can't do this in isolation, and so I think that's why it's so important that EU Life is an ERA stakeholder. So important, because we work in a global system and we can't do this by ourselves. But what I wanted to just flag, which hasn't really come up, I don't think, is leadership in this space. So leadership on this. So I'm from Altos. So within Altos, you know, I've spent a lot of time talking with our CEO, CSO about culture, about collaboration, how we facilitate that, and that comes from, you know, the leaders. I really wasn't expecting that you know, these people were going to spend time thinking about this. So I just think leadership is super important on this, and I just want to say it because we've got a lot of leaders in the room. And the other thing, again, building on what we heard yesterday, is spaces for collaboration. So creating opportunities for collaboration. They don't happen magically. You need to facilitate them. And I don't think that's kind of probably often recognized, and the resource to actually make that happen doesn't happen. It's difficult. And I think that's just 2. So space and leadership are important aspects.
Thank you. May I just make a comment here that we're all members of this EU Life amazing coalition, collaboration, but there are many institutes and researchers out there isolated with less resources than what we have. Maybe without people around, without other colleagues and without other disciplines. And how do we help? How do we think of changes that will include these other researchers in other environments. This is just as a thought. I looked at the posters yesterday, and there was this idea about a forum of science. So maybe a forum of collaboration could be something to think about for our future research institutes.
What I noticed, of course, due to the pandemic, we moved a lot of initiatives online, right? We had a lot of talks and everything online. And I think it also gave a lot of access to people from different fields to certain talks that they wouldn't have been able to attend if this was at a specialized conference to a closed community. So I think already basically increasing science communication, making talks more accessible online also increases the access for researchers from other institutions.
And maybe one other way this could be sort of shifted, Electra, is to have more funding resources instead of individual small project grants to more larger collaborative projects. Yeah. Which is something that, for example, Wellcome Trust is doing to some extent, but I think could be done more. Some of the actually European initiatives, sort of networks of excellence that many of us have participated in, were really good things. So I think more of that would be well received, I suspect.
Yes.
I was attracted by your proposal of an hyper-collaborative space. And do you envision it as also as a virtual space? Going back to what you were saying.
Yes, actually, that was my initial thought.
Right.
A virtual collaboration space.
But how does the hyper-collaborative space work? I understand that it's based on the breakage of walls like groups or even institute, I guess.
Yes, I suppose depends a lot on the discipline and on the research. Such a scheme would be more difficult for experimental scientists, but nevertheless, if that existed, just contributing, exchanging ideas, deciding about side projects, about students visiting, would be much better than not having it at all and have people living in isolation and waiting for a network of excellence, which, as we all know, is very competitive and not something you get every day. Okay, we had two more questions. Yeah, over there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sorry. At CRG with Altos Station in Barcelona, we have developed what we call the collaboratorium, and it's an open space to collaborate. This was drawn in a whiteboard in maybe 15 minutes by both directors. And we, the people from administration, were looking at that, and we thought, wow, here we have at least 1 year of work to go through all the nitty-gritties and all the legal aspects, okay? And it's been true, it's been like this, okay? Now we are finishing, and it's a great idea, and we start to have some very interesting results. But yeah, it's been 1 year of discussions, of detail, of intellectual properties, of what happens if there's an accident, and health and safety, this and that, and it's crazy, okay? What I miss in meetings like this is that we never bring legislators. We never bring really opinion makers in making the laws and writing the laws. In the Spanish parliament, 65% of the people are lawyers. There's only 6 people with a PhD there, and some of them in philosophy and history, okay? Then when you try to talk about science and developing science, it's not just a question of politicians, it's a question of the public administration. And I think that we need to bring somehow these people into discussion. We need to start talking with the law schools, and maybe start to talk about science law speciality and things like that, because if not, we are advancing so fast, and we know now with artificial intelligence and all these things, okay? We are advancing so fast, and the legislators are still with these long dresses and walking slowly and talking about these complicated things, okay? Then we need to involve these people somehow. Yeah, that's, sorry, it wasn't a question, it was an opinion. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think we need to talk more to Marta.
Can I comment on this? Because collaboration for me doesn't mean that I collaborate with my group leader that is in the office next door. So I don't think it's a facility issue. I think it's a mentality issue. I mean, it's the idea, the mentality that if I want to do the best science and I'm an expert in this particular field, I have to collaborate with the best complementary scientists worldwide that has the technologies and has the knowledge that I have to do. And if you're looking for this in your own institute, I mean, that's again the wrong mentality. I mean, I think it should be look outside, look worldwide, and look to the top labs throughout the world and try to find the best collaborator for the problem that comes up. So I'm not really sure whether collaboration should be reduced again to somewhere a common room or a common lab. That's not the kind of collaboration I have in mind to really move the borders of science and to really make progress in science. I really think we should be ambitious there and try to each for ourselves be top in our own field and try to collaborate with other toppers in other fields. And that's what will really make the progress.
For each of you, what makes the best collaborator, or what kind of collaborator would you like to work with? In terms of characteristics.
It has to be a topper, but I can guarantee you that personality plays a role as well. And you have to be honest in this. I mean, with some people it will never work. With other people it will work in 5 minutes. I mean, and that's something that changes from case to case. But I think we have to accept again that you cannot force these things. It has to come bottom up. But top scientist, 1, and 2, does he fit your character? I mean, that's my personal experience.
And I think genuine scientific synergy, and that both parties benefit from the collaboration.
Okay, in my case, I always like to work with open-minded researchers who are always willing to hear you out, and even though they don't understand your field, they give some tips in a way like, okay, maybe I don't catch this well, but maybe it could work if we did this, and you are trying to search for some ways to find a solution to the problem. So even though the person from the other field doesn't understand it fully, and they give you some tips, and this is really precious for me in the collaboration.
Okay, so I think it's time to wrap up. You want to say something? Please, go ahead. Okay. Marta is waving. So lots of interesting questions. All agree multidisciplinary collaboration is here to stay, to make science better. It's one of the ingredients that will help the recipe of science, together with creativity, open-mindedness, innovation, become good. I think EU Life is such a living example. We are living this now. We are part of this institution, of this collaboration, and there are many people from different disciplines together, coming here together. And I'm not talking about the directors, I'm talking about the people who are members of the working groups. So obviously this is something we would like to continue. 1 and 1 is much larger than 2, and certainly include these ideas in the future institute. Thank you very much, and thank you all.